Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 370. We're doing our favorite 2022 NFL betting props. Joined once again by Jacob Camenker from the Sporting News. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm a little bit tired. It's draft week. You know, you, me, and every other draft analyst out there, we're grinding to try to figure out these final mocks. But I'm feeling great. I'm looking forward to the draft. This one's going to be particularly unpredictable and fun, but I think we're going to do a good job. And I think we've got some pretty good betting opportunities with this one this year, too.
Yeah, I hope so. I feel like some of these teams might screw up our mock drafts, unfortunately. Like we have some information on some teams, but none on other teams. And I feel like those teams are going to mess us up. That's like my greatest fear. I'm like waking up in a cold sweat every morning just thinking about that. But yeah, I'm excited for the draft, yet kind of terrified that I'm not going to finish all my research and stuff. So it'll be an interesting week. It's always a fun week for the draft, and it's crazy that it's in about 48 hours. It's kind of snuck up on us, but yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about the props. We've done a mock draft a couple weeks ago with Charlie. Last week we talked about our thoughts for each pick in the first round. So you can look that up on our YouTube page. Just type in Walter Football. But we're going to talk about the gambling aspect of the 2022 NFL Draft today. So before we do that, please hit like button, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. I am wearing a dark green Walter Football t-shirt. I believe it's the same one from last week, and that's what happens when you become a dad. You lose all sense of your clothing stuff. So I'm sure I've watched this shirt, but I can't say for certain. All right. We have, I believe you have 7 or 8 props. I have 9 to discuss. So we're just going to toss out our favorite props to talk about. So the first one I have, and I'm not like extremely confident in this one, but I think it's going to hit. We have the Ike Ekwonu over 4.5 minus 120. You can get this a bookmaker. So I feel like he can go number 3 to Houston, but I think that's the only spot he's going to go. We know 1 and 2 are going to be the edge rushers, Trayvon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson in some order. And then number 4, I believe it's going to be Ahmad Gardner or Derek Stingley. I think the Jets are going to take one of the cornerbacks at 4. So the only spot Ekwonu could go is number 3 to Houston. And yeah, I'm willing to lose this bet if that happens. But otherwise, I think he goes 5 or later. I'm going to have him, I believe, at number 6 in my mock draft tomorrow morning. So what do you think about this prop?
Yeah, I think that the over on Icky is a good bet because there are so many tackles and the opinions varying team to team. Like Evan Neal, Charles Cross, and Icky are sort of the consensus top 3, but they've come in at like any order at any different time. Charles Cross is having a pretty late rise. I've seen some places where he's the first tackle off the board in people's mock drafts. So I don't think that Ekwonu would go at number 3 to the Texans. I think it's possible. I think maybe they even should take an offensive tackle there. But there are players with more upside. If they didn't have the pick at 13, I would say, hey, maybe they'll go with the tackle. But it's possible that Trevor Penning could get to them. It's possible that maybe, if Charles Cross isn't as highly thought of as we thought, he could slip down there. And Ekwonu could have even slipped down a little bit too. Like, I think if he gets past the Giants and then the Panthers at 6, I mean, there's no telling. We don't know what the Falcons and Seahawks are going to do. The Jets might like him at 10. But, yeah, there's just so few landing spots for him in the top 4. I think I've heard buzz about him going to the Jets. But, again, I think the Jets, they'll be positioned to land another tackle at 10 if they really want one. And I think that they would prefer to get one of those top corners. So I agree with you. I think Ekwonu on the over there is a good choice.
Something I heard about Ekwonu is that a team that needs a tackle has him as the 3rd tackle on their big board. They have Evan Neal and Charles Cross pretty close at 1 and 1A. I don't even know if there's a 1-2. I think it's a 1 and 1A at that point. But Ekwonu is number 3 on their board. But that's one team. Like Houston could have him as their number 1 tackle. Carolina could have him as number 1 tackle. Granted, Carolina doesn't really matter for this prop. It's all about Houston, and I just don't have a good read on the Texans. As I wrote on the site earlier, I heard from someone who used to work in Houston's front office that he believes that the Texans are going to take Ahmad Gardner, and recently he changed his mind and thinks they're going to go with Kayvon Thibodeau now. I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. Like, if you had gun to your head, like, what do you think Houston's going to do at number 3? Who do you think they're going to take?
I think that they'd go with Thibodeau. I don't have a good read on Caserio, but I know he comes from the Belichick school of thought. He worked with the Patriots for a long time, and the Patriots frequently would take flyers on guys, granted in the second round, with elite athletic upside, maybe not from a bigger program, but they have the tools needed to, be a big time star at the NFL level. They just need to develop. Now, those didn't always work out, but that's what the Patriots tended to do. I know Thibodeau, I know Charlie was reporting there are a lot of concerns with his, character and work ethic and all that stuff. But I think because the Texans have 2 top 13 picks, they can afford to take a chance on Thibodeau here and just say, hey, if this guy doesn't pan out, we're not going to be screwed. We're not going to be a contender this year anyway. And we can get someone to help Davis Mills, be it a receiver or a tackle at 13. So I think I would say Thibodeau because he has the greatest upside. And in a draft that's so weak at the top, you could either go one of 2 directions. You go with the guy with the upside by far, or you go with the safest pick. Gardner, I think, would be the safest pick because I think there's no world in which he doesn't turn out to be at least a solid number 2 cornerback. And I think Thibodeau has the highest ceiling. So I would go Thibodeau right now, but it really could go in any direction.
Yeah. I agree. I've seen Thibodeau slip past number 10 in some mock drafts. I would be shocked if that happens. He has so much upside. And I posted a rumor today that I saw somewhere else on the website today that said Atlanta is not going to let Thibodeau fall past number 8. So I think his range is 3 to 8. So anyway, what is your first prop that you want to give us?
Yeah, so one that I like is related to Charles Cross. This prop I saw over on Sports Interaction, which is a Canadian sports book. So you could find some other sports books with this prop, but they had the over under on Cross's draft position at 7.5 minus 105 is the under. So I think that under is a slam dunk because what you're looking at there is the Giants and the Panthers. They have 3 picks, 4, 5, and 6. 5, 6, and 7. And I think that they're probably going to take both of them are going to take tackles there in one of those picks. So I think that Evan Neal could go to the Giants at 5. I know Tony Pauline has reported that Charles Cross won't get past the Panthers at 6, which leads me to believe that, hey, if Evan Neal were off the board, the Panthers might be interested in Cross over Equinu. But even if they like Equinu better, maybe Evan Neal goes to the Texans. Maybe they surprise everybody. The Giants could go for Cross there too. Or maybe the Giants take Stingley at 5, knowing that they could have their choice of Neal or Cross at 7 and just let the Panthers take whoever they like at tackle and then go that route. I don't know if it's a full-out slam dunk, but I think we're getting pretty good value, and I don't think Cross is going to make it much further past that 7.5 point. So I like that. I know there's some concern that if it goes Neal and Equinu with those 2 picks, then you're like, all right, well, what are we doing now? But again, I think that Cross has the higher ceiling at this point, so I'm willing to take a bet on that.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's like his floor, like barring something crazy like Bongate or whatever. Like I feel like his floor would probably be number 8 to Atlanta. I would be shocked if the Falcons let him slip by. The Falcons, I believe, are going to take the best player available, and like it could be Cross, but I think you're right in saying that the under 7.5 is the better move. I think there's a better chance that he goes either 5, 6, or 7. Like I think that's the sweet spot for him. It'll definitely help him if I'm wrong about Equanu at the under 4.5. So like if Equanu goes number 3 or another tackle, like if the Texans take Evan Neal, that'll definitely help Cross out a lot because that'll force the Giants into another tackle, and then the Panthers will take the last of the 3 top tackles. So yeah, I like that. I like the under 7.5 for sure. My next prop is Ahmad Gardner under 5.5 minus 148. This is a bookmaker. I'd be shocked if Gardner falls out of the top 5. I think there's a chance the Texans take him at 3, but I can't see him really getting past the Jets at 4. And if he does, by some weird situation, I think the Giants would take him at 5. He's just way too good. There's way too much interest in him at the top of the draft. Minus 148 is it's not a great vig to pay, but I think that Gardner will definitely go to the top 5.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one thing I actually did over on Bovada, this is one of my favorite props. I bet Gardner to go with the number 3 overall pick and then bet him to go with the number 4 overall pick too. Because I don't think he's going to get past both of those teams. I mean, maybe not, and maybe I look foolish, but if you bet all 3 of those together, the Gardner under 5 or Gardner goes top 5, along with the 3 and 4 picks, you're going to profit off that somehow in all likelihood. So right now, Bovada doesn't have the betting odds for the top 3 pick because they seem to be as confused about the Texans as we are. So they've shut those down for the time being. But Gardner to go 4th right now is plus 375. So, if you're willing to take a small risk and just say, hey, like the odds of that happening, I'll bet him to go in the top 5. I'll bet him to go with the 4th pick. I like that pairing because there's a good chance you hit both. And if not, you can make up any money you would lose on the betting of number 4 by betting him to go in the top 5. Because again, I agree. He's not getting past the Giants at 5. They would have their choice of 2 tackles still on the board at that point that they could take at 7. So they would take Sauce at 5.
Yeah, I bet Gardner to go number 4 as well. But I got plus 350, so I didn't get the best price tag. So plus 375 is something I may double down on that. I'm pretty confident in the Jets taking Gardner at number 4, although he could go number 3. So I like your strategy of going 3-4 with Gardner. I think that's pretty smart. I think you can do the same thing with Trayvon Walker at 1 and 2. So maybe we'll discuss that later. So what's the next prop you like?
Yeah, so the next prop that I like, I have, again, this is a sports interaction prop, so this may vary from book to book, but the first receiver drafted, the top 3 guys are Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, and Drake London. London has the longest odds over at sports interaction. It's plus 235. I like betting him because I think there's probably a good chance that Wilson is probably the favorite to go off the board first. I think the Falcons could take him. I think the Jets could take him. But I think there's a pretty good chance that Washington at 11 will take Drake London if he's on the board. It seems to be trending that they like him. We still don't know what the Falcons are going to do. I've seen Drake London mocked to them quite a bit. They definitely have a need at receiver. So I feel like it's more of a toss-up than those odds are letting on. And just from what I've seen, Garrett Wilson was plus 105 and Jameson Williams was plus 190. So I know Drake London has slipped in some places, but I think he might end up being a top 12 pick. So I'm comfortable betting on him at 2.35 to 1 odds there. I think that's a good value pick. And, we're at a position unsettled like receiver. We have a few positions like that in this draft. I think taking someone with longer odds could pay off. So I will be on Drake London for a little bit there.
Yeah, I think the Jets are going to take the first receiver at 10. You're right. We don't know what's going to happen with Atlanta at 8. Washington seems set on a receiver at 11. But I think the Jets, unless they trade the pick, which is definitely possible, I think the Jets are going to take the first receiver at 10. I've seen a lot of buzz about Atlanta taking a receiver. And we don't know what Atlanta's going to do in terms of which players they have higher than others. But it seems like Terry Fontenot's strategy is to take the best player available. And I just don't see that being a receiver. I feel like one of, Kayvon Thibodeau, Charles Cross, Ike Ekwonu, maybe even Evan Neal, if teams are concerned about his medical. I feel like Jermaine Johnson, I feel like one of those guys is going to go number 8. I feel like Atlanta would have one of those, all 5 of those players ahead of the receivers. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they really love Drake London. Maybe they really love Garrett Wilson or Jameson Williams. That's definitely possible. And they really need a receiver. But I think it's more likely that they have those 5 guys over those receivers.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I guess what I'm also hedging against is in the event that Icky slips, the tackle's still on the board at 10 with the Jets, I think they'd have a pretty big decision to make because they seem to like him versus Wilson. So between that and the fact that who knows, maybe Drake London is the top receiver on the Jets board. It doesn't seem that way, but it's at least possible. Or maybe Washington gets tricked by Seattle or something into thinking the Jets might take Drake London. We better move from 11 to 9 to get him if they really like him. I think that's possible. So I just like taking the value there. You've also mentioned Jermaine Johnson. There's another draft position on him under 9.5 minus 120. Again, this was at Sports Interaction, so you have to find it in a comparable U.S. book. But I love that because I don't think he's getting past Seattle if he's still on the board at 9. I think 7 through 9 is where Johnson's going to end up going.
Yes, I like that as well. The only thing that could go wrong there, I feel like, is if Seattle trades down, if Johnson's available at 9, and like if someone wants to move past the Jets to get a receiver that they want, like that could definitely happen. But I think it's more likely that Johnson will go in the top 9. We had a couple questions here, or observation here by Pat. A really good wide receiver prop is Christian Watson under 39.5 and -110. Both Charlie and I have him in the 20s. So with Christian Watson, he's pretty raw, but his upside is ridiculous, and I think that there's a good chance that he goes to either Green Bay or Kansas City. It seems like both those teams would be interested in someone like him. So I like the under 39.5 a lot. Like I don't think it's a lock or anything, because he's so raw, but I feel like the receivers are going to be pushed up. Like we've seen how much teams are paying for these receivers in free agency, and plus this receiving class is really good. So I think the receivers are going to go earlier than most people think. Like for example, I've had Jahan Dotson going in let's say like the 26 to 32 range for a while, and I just moved them up to 22 today, and I think he can go even earlier than that. Like I just feel like all the receivers are going to go earlier than people think, starting at like number 10.
Yeah, the big thing about Christian Watson is that he has that untapped potential. Like he's super raw, but he tested similar to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I know that's not a good comparison. Like you don't want to draft him in the first round and him turn into that. But we just saw Marquez Valdez-Scantling get paid $10 million. Like those types of skills, even without production, are really valuable. So they'll look at Watson and say, hey, he's raw. But if we tap into this, especially teams with like Kansas City or Green Bay who have an elite quarterback, they're going to say, hey, if we can just get him in sync and get chemistry with Mahomes and Rodgers, that's going to work out really there. I'd be surprised if he doesn't go in the first round. I've actually made a bet on a special prop over on Bovada. I made this yesterday. Ahmad Gardner to be a top 5 pick, which we already talked about liking, and Christian Watson to go in the first round. That's plus 250, those two together. So basically what you're getting is Christian Watson under 32.5 for plus 250 if you view Gardner as a lock. So I like that pickup for myself, but I really like that under 39.5. I'd be surprised if he gets out of the first round, and if he does, he should go early that second day, because some team's going to look at the receivers on the board and be like, that's a guy we need to go get. We always see trades up on the second day of the draft. People get really excited about who's left on the board.
Yeah, I like your first round. Was it plus 250 you said?
Yeah, plus 250 paired with the Sauce Gardner.
I like that. I like that better than the under 39.5 -110. They're both good, but I like getting the plus 250 big for sure. Arseem, my apologies if not pronouncing that correctly. He says, why isn't edge a lock for the Falcons? So, I mean, I think it's a lock if Kayvon Thibodeau's there at 8. But the top edge rushers are going to be off the board otherwise. There's still Jermaine Johnson. He can go there. But I think they go edge or tackle. Like, I feel like that's going to be the best player available. Like, Atlanta's going to take the best player available. Like, that's their strategy. I'd be surprised if they take a quarterback. I don't think they'll deem quarterback to be the best player available. We saw that last year when they took Kyle Pitts over Justin Fields. And I think they're going to still utilize that strategy. So it's either going to be an edge or a tackle. I mean, their pass protection is so bad. I know their pass rush is terrible too, but they can't pass protect. So it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They need to protect that quarterback. So I think it's going to be do you agree? Do you think it's going to be tackle or edge?
Yeah, I think so. I think those are the top 2 needs. I think they could go receiver if they really like one of those guys, but the receiver crop is, well, all 3 of those positions are deep, but receiver is really deep. Like you could go all the way in the 4th, 5th, 6th round and still find quality players that you could say, hey, Marcus Mariota can get the job done with this guy. And I know having like Olamide Zaccheaus as your top receiver is not exactly exciting, but they won't exit the draft with that. And I agree with you on quarterback. There's no way they're going to take a quarterback here. If they didn't like Justin Fields or Mac Jones at 4 last year, granted, there were other better players on the board at that time too. I just don't see them going quarterback early. I think they're going to look for someone on day 2 just to compete with Marcus Mariota. I think Carson Strong, as weird as this sounds, might be a guy that interests them on like in the 3rd round or early 4th, because he's the exact opposite of Mariota in terms of he's not very mobile, but he has a big arm and struggles with accuracy, whereas Mariota is mobile, accurate, but doesn't have the biggest arm because of those elbow injuries. So if you mesh them together, they can become one great quarterback. So maybe they try out a couple different styles under Arthur Smith and see what works.
Yeah, why not? I mean, They really don't have much going for them right now. They can wait for a receiver. In my mock draft right now, I have them taking Alec Pierce at 58, then John Mechie at 74, and then Kevin Austin at 114. You're right. I mean, there's so much receiving depth. They can just get one later and not kind of force it at number 8. Couple of things here before we move on. CHR Wedge asking, what are the Giants going to do? I think we talked about already. They're going to go tackle or corner tackle in some order. I feel like that's what they're going to do. And I think if the top 2 corners are off the board, like if they go 3 and 4, I think they go tackle at 5 and then Thibodeau at 7. That's what I think they would do. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's how it's going to shake out. If Stingley goes off the board at 6, say the Seahawks trade up, or say the Texans take him and Sauce goes off at 4, they'll get Kayvon Thibodeau in that case. And if they really don't like Thibodeau, then they can just take Jermaine Johnson instead. I know he has some character concerns that Charlie reported on as well, but it doesn't sound like they're going to knock him too far down the board. That's the weird thing about this draft class. Like, there's so few like true first round prospects. I think Tom Pelissero reported that some teams have like as few as 15. So they're going to be more willing to overlook character concerns just because of the dearth of overall talent up there.
Yeah, it's not a great draft class to be picking at the top. Justin asking, what are the true rumors about Evan Neal having some injury health concerns? So Charlie posted that today. Some teams do not, they kind of flunked Evan Neal medically, but some other teams like passed him. So it really depends from team to team. It kind of reminds me of several years ago when Charlie reported that Leighton Vander Esch was removed from one team's draft board because of his neck injuries. And yet Dallas still took him in the first round. So like really each team has its own medical staff and they're just going to do it privately. They're not going to be like, hey, this other team flunked them, we're going to flunk them too. So it really depends on the teams and their doctors. So I would be shocked if Evan Neal fell out of the top 8. I think Atlanta is his absolute floor. And so, some teams may have flunked him, but that doesn't mean that he's going to fall.
Yeah, and supplementing Charlie's reporting, I read from Peter King that I think maybe a quarter of the teams in the league had flunked Evan Neal. So, I mean, that leaves 24 teams to fall in love with the guy. You got to imagine some of them are in the top 10. So I don't think it'll knock him down. That's more of something just to watch. Like, hey, if like some injury issue crops up, it's not unexpected. The team drafting knows about whatever medical concern exists with him, and they'll be able to deal with it if they draft him.
Yeah, for sure. And last question, where do you plan on dumping Baker Mayfield? Giants, Steelers, Seahawks, Panthers? I think he's going to the Seahawks or the Panthers, whichever team doesn't get the quarterback they want. Carolina is kind of in rough shape because they pick at number 6, and then they don't pick again until, 137. So, like, they could trade next year's 2nd and 3rd to get a 2nd, in the middle of the 2nd round. Like that, they could do that. But still, it's still a pretty rough spot. So I think that Seattle is going to get the quarterback at once. My guess is either Matt Corral or Sam Howell. And Carolina is just not going to get the quarterback if they don't take one at 6, which I don't think is going to happen. So I believe that Mayfield will go to Carolina.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're going to find themselves backed into like that area where it's going to be like, all right, we can take a chance on Bailey Zappi in the draft here, or we could trade for Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo. They'll look at the Mayfield price tag and say, well, that's got more upside at this point because it's cheaper and he's younger. And they'll get him. And I've got this crazy theory that, hey, what if the Browns don't want to pay Mayfield? Well, what if they took back Sam Darnold? They take Sam Darnold, they improve the draft compensation they get because, Sam Darnold is nothing but dead weight at this point for the Panthers. So, if they swap those guys, they're both making the same exact amount of $18.8 million. So I think the Browns might be willing to say, hey, we'll take Sam Darnold. That's the equivalent of us paying Baker Mayfield. You keep some cap space and give us a better pick. And maybe not even have to be this year. They might take it for the year after and just say, all right, like we might need picks this year, but Panthers don't have them and they're the only ones willing to deal at this point. So I could see something like that happening. And then the Browns would obviously cut Sam Darnold because if they get stuck with Baker Mayfield, they're probably going to have to cut him anyway. So why not just eat the money on Darnold instead while getting a better pick?
Oh, they don't want Sam Darnold. Who doesn't want Sam Darnold? I like that move though. It makes a lot of sense for sure. All right, moving on. My next prop is Kyle Hamilton over 10.5. It's big sucks. It's minus 201, but I'd be shocked if he goes in the top 10 at this point. I think the only spot he could go in the top 10 is number 8 to Atlanta. If the Falcons think that he's the best player available, I think that makes the most sense. Otherwise, I can't find a spot for him in the top 10. So what do you think about my prop despite the minus 201 big?
Yeah, I like it. I would probably look to pair that with something else if you can, just to improve the VIG, like something we're pretty confident in. Like if you paired that with Sauce Gardner top 5, like I know not every place allows parlays like that, and I know those do carry some risk, but I would like that because I think Kyle Hamilton could fall all the way to 20 possibly. I think his range is really like the 11 to 20 at this point, maybe even lower. One team that I keep wanting to mock him to, and I actually did this on Monday, was the Vikings, just because they're in such a bad spot in terms of how their needs line up with the draft boards. And they got Harrison Smith out of Notre Dame like a decade ago as a guy who kind of fell into their laps, and it was like concerns about his athleticism and everything. And he's turned into a good playmaker. Doesn't mean Hamilton would do the same thing, but I could see the Vikings saying, hey, look, this guy, most talented on the board. Let's just take him if they can't move down. So, yeah, but either way, Kyle Hamilton's not going in the top 10 unless Atlanta falls in love with him. And I feel like we would have heard about that at this point.
Yeah, true. I think Minnesota is a really good spot for Hamilton. I think the Vikings would want to trade down just because, like you said, their needs don't really match up with who's going to be available. Though Kyle Hamilton does I guess he violates that, but there are concerns with him about his natural position. His 4.7 at the pro day is pretty bad. So I think you're right. He could fall past the Vikings and the Eagles, the teams that could take him all the way to 20. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like I'm sure the Steelers would love him at 20. But I think ultimately, I think Minnesota is a good landing spot for him. I may mock Hamilton to the Vikings in number 12. So anyway, what's your next prop?
Yeah, so my next prop, let's see what I have. I had the number of offensive linemen drafted in the first round. This was, again, over at a Canadian sports book, so you might have to find it elsewhere. There's 7.5. I have the over on that at plus 155. On the surface, if you count the offensive linemen, you're going to be like, who's going to be that 8th guy to put this over the number? But let me give you 4 that we know are going in the first round, barring a massive surprise. Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, Charles Cross, and Trevor Penning. Those guys probably go top 15. Then look at the guard center class. We got Zion Johnson, Kenyon Green, Tyler Linderbaum. And I know Charlie's reported that he might fall to day 2. I think Charlie reported that at least. Someone else might have reported that. But Linderbaum's going to be on the fringe there, so a little bit of worry. But where there's so few first-round talents in this class, I feel like those guards have been steady producers. They're going to get pushed up. So that's 7 right there. Then there are 2 wild cards that I've seen ranked highly places. Tulsa's Tyler Smith and Central Michigan's Bernard Raymond. I think it's far more likely that Tyler Smith would sneak into the first round. He's the typical like super raw tackle you'd see taken in the second round that has a lot of upside but a high bust potential. I think he's going to get pushed up in this year's draft just because of the lack of top talent. So I think he could end up being the 8th guy there. Now, this is a risky pick, but at plus 155, it's a risk I'm willing to take just because I think those 4 offensive linemen in the back half of the first round, I think they all sneak in somehow.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's a chance Linderbaum goes in the first round for sure. I mean, I have him 33 to Jacksonville. I think Charlie has the same. So it's like 1 pick away from being in the first round. So that could definitely happen. Tyler Smith seems like he would go in the first round. Bernard Raymond's the one guy I don't think will go in the first round because Charlie reported that there are some injury question marks with him. But again, like with Evan Neal, like some teams may have cleared them and have no issues with taking him in the first round. So I guess it really depends on how teams view him medically. Talent-wise, I think he definitely belongs near the end of the first round. It's just a question of whether he's going to fail some medical tests and whatnot. So, I think I would go over offensive lineman 8. Was it 7.5? You said, right?
7.5 plus 155.
Yeah, especially with the VIG at plus 155. Like I think I would definitely go over before I went under. I think you're right in saying that there are probably going to be 8 offensive linemen chosen in the first round. So we had a question here about Kyle Hamilton over 11.5 minus 115. So definitely better VIG there. You just risk Washington getting Kyle Hamilton. I mean, you're very familiar with Washington. Do you think Kyle Hamilton has a good chance to go there?
I think there's a chance, but if Drake London's on the board, I think that Hamilton would not be the pick there. John Kime from ESPN he's a great reporter, first of all, and he's been reporting that Washington loves Drake London and they prefer him to Kyle Hamilton. I think if London comes off the board, either to Atlanta or the Jets by surprise, you run the risk there that they like Hamilton more than Chris Olave or whoever else is available at receiver. But I don't mind it to get that change in the VIG. You could either take that VIG or do what we talked about and take the over 10.5 and pair it with something else that has what we think is a high probability of success.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, my next prop, and this is, I think, a little misleading once you first see it. Kenny Pickett to be selected by the Detroit Lions is plus 2,800. So you get 28-1 odds on this, and you're like, wait, he's not going to go number 2, and you're right. I think he goes 32 to the Lions. I think he falls that far. That's where I have him going in my mock draft today. I think that's where he's going to end up. Charlie and I have been talking to teams about Kenny Pickett. We can't find any landing spots for this guy at all. Like, I don't think Carolina is going to take him at 6. Atlanta is going to take the best player available at 8. So I don't think Pickett goes in the top 10. So I had Pickett going to the Saints, and I was told no. I was like, okay, what about Tennessee? I was told no. So like, where does he go? Like, Pittsburgh is a possibility. We don't have anyone in Pittsburgh, but like with his small hands, it's going to be problematic. I know he played at Pitt, but he never played in the regular season beyond Thanksgiving. So like, the Steelers are going to have to count on him playing in December and January in the freezing cold with those cold hands. And he had fumbling issues in college. He had 37 fumbles, I believe, at Pitt. So like, it's just going to be worse in December and January. So the Steelers want a mobile quarterback. Like, Kenny Pickett can move around the pocket just fine, but he's not like Malik Willis or Sam Howell or something like that. Like, he's not. I feel like he's not the quarterback they want. So like, where does he go? And I think the Lions would take Pickett at 32. I know they like Jared Goff. They had this proclamation saying, we're not going to trade a second-round pick for Goff, even though no one's offering a second-round pick for Goff. But I think they're going to be intrigued enough with him to take him at 32. Kind of reminds me of the Ravens in 2018 when they had 2 first-round picks, and they took Hayden Hurst in the first round, and then they drafted Lamar Jackson at the end of the first round. So like, they didn't like Lamar Jackson to take him. I believe they had 13, but they liked him enough at the end of the first round because they saw the value. And I think Detroit's going to see the value with Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I had pegged in my my betting article about this, the Titans as a worthwhile risk at 14-1. But with you saying no, that makes me a little wary. The Lions at 28-1 seem like a pretty good option at this point now, because as you've said, it's very hard to find landing spots for any of them. And if you look too, if the Panthers pass on Malik Willis is going to last longer than people realize too, because people like to say like, oh, well, if Panthers don't take him, the Seahawks might take him. The Seahawks don't seem to be looking at him. They're more looking at the Matt Corral types in that trade up from the second round area. So I'm not convinced that they're going to take him. And then after that, it's like, does Malik Willis go to the Saints? Maybe. But if he doesn't, like, he's going to fall into the Steelers' lap. So, or at least be in a range where they could trade up like the Bears did last year to get Justin Fields. So I think you'll look at that and say, all right, well, Malik Willis is probably going to be a Steeler if that happens. So if that happens, then where does Kenny Pickett go? Lions are a good bet, 28-1. Why not take a flyer?
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. 28-1 would be nice. So this is interesting. I don't know if I told you this, but Charlie talked to a team that needs a quarterback. And they ranked Kenny Pickett 4th on their board for the position. They had Malik Willis number 1, they had Sam Howell number 2, and then they had Matt Corral number 3, and then they had Pickett number 4. So, these teams don't like Pickett as much as some of these like draft fanatics do. Like, I'm sure there are some teams who like Pickett just fine, but it really seems like he's in for a slide.
Yeah, it does. And one other thing that I've heard some buzz about Corral too, like, teams seem to like him. I know there's been some similar buzz about Desmond Ridder, but I think that's more media fueled than anything else. But I think that like Corral could sneak into that end of the first round too, and maybe even go in front of Pickett. I mean, you're saying a team has Corral in front of him. Like, who knows? Maybe that's a team that could trade back into the first round, or maybe it's a team that has a late first round pick. Like, I think that, yeah, I think the quarterback order is going to get a little weird. And I think that the mobility factor is going to play a big role in this. Again, like you said, not that Kenny Pickett's immobile, but there are more mobile quarterbacks And I think that's going to be valued in this draft class, considering the lack of top tier arm talent and consistency throughout the board on these guys.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd be surprised about is if Malik Willis falls out of the first round. I think he's definitely going to go in the first round, but it would not surprise me if Kenny Pickett fell out of the first round. That leads me to this comment by CHR Wedge. He says, the legendary Daniel Jones is entering his 5th year as the Giants quarterback. He's due $22.5 million. Did the Giants pay up or cut base and draft a quarterback? Charlie Campbell has the Giants drafting. I guess spoiler alert for it. I saw his mock draft tomorrow. He has the Giants drafting Kenny Pickett in the 2nd round. So that could definitely happen. And if I think it depends on what happens. So like if the Giants can get a quarterback they want in the 2nd round, then I think it makes sense to just cut Daniel Jones because he's so much money. He's not worth it. And just go with the cheap guy and just try to restructure your team that way.
Yeah, the other option in that scenario would be you keep Daniel Jones for the year because you're eating the money anyway, because I think it's mostly guaranteed, if not fully. And then if your offensive line or offense isn't looking great at the start of the year, you kind of say, all right, we'll give Pickett some time to learn behind the scenes and then not throw him to the wolves immediately. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the Giants take a quarterback if they fall in love with one of these guys. And hey, if Pickett makes it to them, that would be an interesting pickup to say the least.
Yeah, it's like, you don't expect the Lions or Giants to take him early, but they could take him in the 32 to 40 range for sure. All right, so what's your next draft pop?
I got one more thought on Pickett that just popped in my head. Reminds me of Drew Locke. His draft year, lots of people were like, oh no, he's going to be like a top 15 pick. Maybe he'll go in like the top 20, but he's not falling out of the first round. Lo and behold, he makes it all the way to 40. That draft year that was 2019, right? Yeah, that was the Daniel Jones. Yeah,
pretty bleak quarterback draft except for Murray.
Yeah, you've talked about how that class is similar to this class, except this class doesn't have a Kyler Murray. So maybe Kenny Pickett's this year's Drew Locke. Who knows?
That's a good thought. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's a good comparison for sure. I remember, a lot of people had Locke in the first round. They're trying to figure out where he's going to go. It kind of feels like now with Pickett, like I can't figure out where to put him. I think the Lions would take him at 32 if he got there. Could be wrong, but I think they would make the move. So what do you think? What's your next prop?
Yeah, so let's see what my next prop is. Well, I had Jaguars number 1 overall pick Trayvon Walker, but that VIG has dropped significantly.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly a great looking bet anymore.
Yeah, you might get a good price on Hutchinson now, number 1.
Yeah, if you want to hedge your bet and go with Hutchinson, if you've already bet, like I bet Trayvon Walker when he was 4.5 to 1. So now Hutchinson over at Bovada is 2.5 to 1. So I could hedge my bet there. And I also have Icky Ekwonu at like 8 to 1 from way earlier in the offseason. So that would cover all my bases there because I think those are the 3 potential options, with Icky being way outside the box. But anyway, that I might actually be out of props with that one, no longer there. So I'll let you go.
Okay, well, this one's related to the last one I posted. Kenny Pickett over 12.5 minus 180. Again, this is like not great VIG, but I feel like it's pretty locked in. Like I like maybe Atlanta takes him at 8. As I said before, we don't have any sources with the Falcons, but I think the Falcons want to take the best player available. So I'd be pretty shocked if that happens. And 12, you look at like 12.5. So like who's 12? It's Minnesota. Given how much they're paying Kirk Cousins, I don't see that happening. Like if they trade down, which I said that they might do, like if they move down to 20, like if I feel like the Steelers would want to move up for Malik Willis, potentially maybe leapfrog Houston if they think the Texans are going to take him at 13. If they do that and Minnesota moves to 20, I could maybe see them taking Kenny Pickett at 20, but like either way, I'd be shocked if he goes in the top 12. So minus 180 looks intimidating, but I think it's going to hit.
Yeah. Based off what we've talked about, I'd be surprised if that happens again. I think there's a good possibility that if Carolina say passes on Malik Willis too, and he's available, which is looking highly likely, like, where's Malik Willis going to go? If he's not off the board, Pickett's probably not coming off the board at this point. So I definitely like the over 12.5. That should hit slam dunk. Pat's saying there's an over 15.5 if you want better VIG for Pickett. I would take that too, because you hedge the Saints there by taking the 15.5. Like if he does go to the Saints by surprise, that's possible. But the only other way he would go before in the top 15 is if someone traded up, or if the Panthers surprise took Malik Willis and the Falcons loved Kenny Pickett and we just didn't know it.
Yeah. 15.5 is, I think that's still pretty safe. And I found that prop last night. So it's definitely significant if it moved that much in the past. It was early in the morning, actually. So it's less than 24 hours. So it's pretty significant. The sports books probably know something about this. So I think that even at 15.5, I still definitely would take the over, because at 13, 14, 15, Baltimore is not going to take Pickett at 14. So you're looking at Houston at 13 and Philadelphia at 15. I don't see them going quarterback. I feel like the Texans want to see what they have in Davis Mills, and 15 with Jalen Hurts. Like Pickett's not going to be an upgrade over Jalen Hurts. So I would go over 15.5. I have some stale props as well that I posted on the site. I don't think you can get these, but if you can, it's definitely worth looking into. Trayvon Walker under 3.5 minus 246. That's a huge vig to pay, but I mean, he's definitely going top two. I found this on Monday morning. So it could theoretically still be somewhere. I found this at Bookmaker. Maybe Bookmaker is a little slow to change, but you can find stale lines somewhere. Like I've definitely done that before. And also with the second overall pick, it was Aiden Hutchinson at plus 200 and then Trayvon Walker at plus 350, which I found weird because it's going to be one of those two guys in all likelihood. So you're going to lose one of these, but you're going to win the other, and they're both plus. So you're going to win one of these for sure.
Yeah, those are definitely good ones to bet if you can still find them.
Yeah. Pat saying 16.5 now, moved the past a couple hours. So that brings in the Saints, which would concern me, but I heard that the Saints said no. Like maybe that's bad information, but I don't think the Saints are going to take him. I know the Saints were saying that they were concerned with his hand size, even though they play in a dome, which is, I think was pretty significant. The other prop I have here, this is at BetUS. The Giants at 5 and 7 select Evan Neal and Derek Stingley respectively. This is 10-1 odds. So this is obviously not locked in. You were talking about how the Giants might go corner at 5 and then tackle at 7, which could happen. Maybe they go Charles Cross instead of Evan Neal. But I think Stingley is pretty safe to go to them at either 5 or 7. So I like this at 10-1. If this were like 3-1, 2-1, I wouldn't bet it. But 10-1 seems like a good number for me.
Yeah, I like that at 10-1. It's a calculated risk, but it's something that I could easily foresee happening. It's not like so far out there. It's not like we're betting Daniel Falele to be a top 10 pick or anything here.
Wonder what the number on that would be.
I don't know. I just looked at him. Top 32 pick is plus 200, so it would be enormous as enormous as him to get into the top 10. I have Daniel Falele on my mind because I was just writing about him and his pro day. And he's huge, but he cannot move like athletically. So I look forward to seeing where he ends up. That's my takeaway about him.
To put him in roller skates or something to get him to move around. CHR Wedge asking Jacob, what on earth is going on with Jacob's beloved Patriots? Half the coaches are gone. Players released. Only one free agent picked up. Will they be drafting big? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. They've been very quiet this offseason. I think they're kind of sitting tight amid the chaos of everything that's happening. They had a pretty good team last year. They added a lot in the previous free agency. They spent more money than anyone before the Jaguars did this year in NFL history. So there's a lot to like about what they did last year. This year, they just have lost a lot. We'll see how they do without Josh McDaniels, how Mac Jones does. But I'm definitely interested to see what they do. I went away from mocking them Devin Lloyd for once in my life so far and put Daxton Hill there because I finally remembered he existed. He just seems like a Patriots type guy. Then Charlie promptly reported that Daxton Hill was sliding down draft boards a little bit. I still think he goes first round, but probably closer to the end of it because there's some concerns there with whether he could actually play every position in the secondary. But I think they end up going linebacker. I think they're going to add a lot to their defense in this draft and try to get some more receiving weapons for Mac Jones. But that Devontae Parker trade, I think, is bigger than people realize because that gives them a jump ball receiver, which is what N'Keal Harry was supposed to be and never really turned into. So between that and Jacoby Myers and the other role players they have, they're going to be pretty good on offense, I think.
It feels like every player is sliding, you know.
Yeah.
Outside of Charles Cross, is there someone who's moving up? Like I feel like I haven't heard anyone like rising on boards, right?
Yeah, no, like maybe Tyler Smith a little bit, but you guys have been out in front of that for a long time that he could be a potential riser. Trayvon Walker technically is rising, but the difference between top 5 and number 1 overall is somewhat significant, but that's been happening over a period of time. Everyone else, though, it's like, hey, this guy's kind of rising. Oh, no, wait, no, there's a problem.
Yeah, it feels like teams are finding flaws with every prospect, and that's what happens in a bad draft class. Speaking of falling players, Pat's asking, are you guys fading Pickens? His position is 36.5, which is much too high given its concerns, and the VIG is pretty good at 115. Yeah, I mean, Pickens has character concerns for sure, but he's a phenomenal talent. So, if a team that's not worried about character concerns, like i.e. the Bengals, they've drafted players without character concerns. I don't think they're going to go receiver in the first round or anything, but a team like the Bengals who have ignored character needs, like maybe Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers are all in right now. I don't think they really care what's going to happen beyond a couple years because they're set on winning the Super Bowl this year. Like a team like Tampa Bay makes sense for Pickens. So like he could like theoretically go before 36.5, but I think it's more likely than not that he goes after 36.5. So I would bet the over in 36.5, and minus 115 is pretty good big.
Yeah, I would bet the over too. I'd have some concerns about the Chiefs too, because they're so desperate at receiver, and Andy Reid has been willing to give guys with those character concerns a chance. And actually, more often than not, I feel like it's panned out for him. That might just be rose-colored glasses and not remembering every player he's picked in my entire life. But I think I would go under with Pickens too. I would at least lean that way. There are other things I like more than that, but the other concern I have though is him getting pushed up on day 2, like that. You have that whole like 8 hours of like time we're awake that the draft isn't happening, and people just be like, "Oh, George Pickens is available," and a team that might like him might be like, "Oh man, yeah, they're starting to get buzzed. Got to go up and get him." So there's enough concern for me that I wouldn't bet it, but I would still lean the under.
Yeah, it's a good thought. I mean, teams could be talking themselves into Pickens. That, like, they don't expect them to be available in the second round, and they're like, are his character concerns that bad? Like, like he's not terrible or anything. So yeah, I think you're right. He could go earlier. I still would go over 36.5, but it's not. I don't think it's a slam dunk or anything, but I think it's something I would do before the under. And last comment here, DM me with your Cash App tag and get spoil instantly if you need money. Does she think she means spoils? Like, what does that mean, spoil? I don't know. Anyway, that is about it for our props. And thanks for everyone for listening and all the questions and comments. They were great. I hope everyone enjoys the draft. I can't believe it's in 48 hours. Feels like it was... it feels like it was months away just a couple of days ago, but now it's here, and there's a lot of work to do, but it's going to be awesome. So yeah, that's it. Do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Camenker. I'm tweeting some of my pre-draft work over at sportingnews.com. From there, you can check out the website sportingnews.com as well for all of your NFL draft needs. We've got a ton of content set to publish these next 4 or 5 days. We'll have a lot of stuff on the draft. I will have my final mock draft probably post on Thursday. I will update it live. When I say live, I mean I will be live updating it in the lead up to probably 7 p.m., right up till an hour before the draft, until I feel like, all right, there's no changes I can make. This year, it's probably going to go right down to the wire, given how unpredictable it is. But I will make sure to tweet that so you can follow along with me Thursday. And yeah, just follow me in general, and let's enjoy this draft. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also, check out Walt and Charlie's stuff, because they do all the reporting and the legwork, and they're always good at it.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to have our updated mock draft on Thursday as well. Something I don't get real quick is like when like these contests say you have to have your final mock draft by midnight on Thursday morning. It's like, yeah, but like people might work late. Like, like I don't understand that. Like I obviously have a son now, and taking care of him during the day, I won't be able to update it till, like, even if I had that deadline, I wouldn't be able to finish it by midnight. So yeah, I mean, we're always talking to people. Charlie's talking to everyone in the league somehow. So he's going to have a ton of information, tons on the website. Charlie's draft rumor mill tomorrow. I looked at it right before we started recording. It's a lot of info in the top 10. So definitely looking forward to sharing all that with you and our mock drafts. And during the draft, we're going to have live draft grades minutes after each pick. So, if your team makes the dreaded Millen grade, you're going to hear about it. But hopefully your team makes nothing but A+ grades, which means our mock drafts are going well. So, that is it for this week. I will talk to you next week, and we'll be talking about the draft grades.
All right. Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Yep, absolutely. Talk to you later.